Om Tavagatamaratam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhedidam Kalmashapaham Sharavanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvigananti Puriyajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on the chapter, the Master and Keshab. This is page 134, and the date is October 27th, 1882. You may remember that Keshab had showed up unannounced at the Dakshineshwar temple on a big steamer. And many of the members of the Brahmo Samaj were on it. They used to do that from time to time. They would have these outings. And of course they were thrilled if they could stop and have Sri Ramakrishna come. That would be the main attraction, of course. And so this is what happened. And just by chance, Vijay Krishna Goswami had come to see Sri Ramakrishna, not knowing about the boat trip. He was in the room with him and didn't want to miss the opportunity to be with him, so he also went and got on the boat the same time that Sri Ramakrishna got on the boat. And it was a little bit embarrassing because he and Keshab, who had, of course, worked very, very closely together, and I'm sure had a personal friendship, had split over the marriage of Keshab's daughter to the son of the Maharaja of Kuch Bihar, which became a little bit of a scandal. It seems there were two different things. One is that she was a little bit under the marriageable age. And this is a marriageable age that the Brahmos themselves had set. It wasn't a legal thing. He didn't do anything illegal, of course. But this was one of their big issues, that they were against the child marriage. So it didn't look very good. Some people thought a little hypocritical of Keshab, and they made a principle out of it, and they separated and started their own group. And Vijay Krishna Goswami became the head of the other group, or at least the priest of it. And so it was a little embarrassing when the two of them saw each other. The other thing is, some people objected to the fact that Keshab had married his daughter to someone from a different caste. Now, for the Brahmos, this probably wasn't a big issue, because they didn't care too much for these things. But we were just reading the other night that, who was it? Huh? Captain, yeah. Captain was a very orthodox Brahmin. He was worked for the government of Nepal. He objected to Thakur going to see Keshab. Keshab mixed with English people and did all sorts of things, plus married his daughter to someone from a different caste. So, but the real issue was about the age of the daughter. Thakur didn't care too much. I think it seems like it was just a few months before the limit that she had to reach. Anyhow, that's not very important. This is just a little background. So they're on the steamer, and they're going up the Ganga and coming back down, and no one is aware of anything because, of course, as soon as Thakur goes there, he goes into samadhi and then comes down in ecstatic state. He's speaking the whole time. I mean, this was the whole purpose, really, that they would have his company. So the steamer had been going toward Calcutta. So this will be, maybe they'd already gone up and they're coming back down now, or I don't remember. But the passengers, with their eyes fixed on the Master and their ears given to his nectar-like words, were oblivious of its motion. Dakshineshwar, with its temples and gardens, was left behind. The paddles of the boat churned the waters of the Ganges with a murmuring sound. But the devotees were indifferent to all this. Spellbound, they looked on a great yogi, his face lighted with a divine smile, his countenance radiating love, his eyes sparkling with joy. A man who had renounced all for God and who knew nothing but God. Unceasing words of wisdom flowed from his lips. Master. The Gyanis who adhere to the non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta say that the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, the universe itself and all its living beings, are the manifestations of Shakti, the divine power. Now, there's a little footnote, says, known as Maya in the Vedanta philosophy. Footnote is there because this isn't the way typical Advaitin would probably describe their view of how the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction take place. This idea of Shakti is something which we attribute more to this, what they call the school of the Shaktas. The Shaktas are not really an official Vedantic school as far as I know. I don't think there's any commentary, Upanishadic commentary and things like that. The different schools of Vedanta will be mostly Shankaracharya, and then there are four major Vaishnava schools. They'll be the ones that are considered to be official because they have commentaries on the Prasthanatraya, the three pillars of Vedanta. This was, at one time, this became the standard. You needed to have a commentary on the Upanishads, main Upanishads, on the Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita, in order to be considered an authentic sampradaya and school of Vedanta. So the Shaktas were not quite so formal as all of that, but they had this belief that everything is the manifestation of the Divine Mother, of Shakti. Now there are so many different schools. There's something called Shakti Parinamavada, that it's kind of an evolution or a manifestation of Shakti itself. Why do they say that? Because Brahman is unchangeable. So it's not Brahman that undergoes any change, but that power of Brahman that will manifest itself as the universe. Now, I just said that it sounds a little bit off from what the real Advaitins will say, but the next sentence will help us understand that Thakur is really describing it quite nicely. If you reason it out, so this is what, first he's saying that the Advaitins will say that all of this is manifestation of Shakti, or the divine power. If you reason it out, you will realize that all these are as illusory as a dream. Brahman alone is the reality, and all else is unreal. Even this very Shakti is unsubstantial like a dream. So we're getting a little bit closer. Now we have to remember one thing, that when we talk about the Vedantins, Thakur will talk about this very often. He has an interesting type of terminology that he uses. He'll say according to Vedanta or according to the Puranas. Now, what does he mean by that? When he says according to Vedanta, he means according to the Gyanis, which means the Advaitins. When he says according to the Puranas, he's talking about the bhaktas, the devotees, and either dualistic or qualified non-dualistic, but not the strict Advaita Vedanta. Now, when we talk about the philosophy of the Upanishads, and when we talk about the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, we have to understand that Advaita Vedanta is an interpretation of the Upanishads, as is Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta. All of them are interpretations. In the Upanishads, we find a little bit more of a tendency to interpret things realistically. We don't find any of this, that this world is Maya, that it's like a dream. We don't really find that in the Upanishads. The real non-dualism of the Upanishads is the absolute oneness of Atman and Brahman, or the individual and Brahman. This we find in the Mahavakyas, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, and the others. So from that point of view, a very strong case can be made that the Upanishads follow this Advaitic, non-dualistic position with regard to the nature of the individual self, Jivatman, and the Paramatman, or Brahman, that there's a oneness. When it comes to the theory of creation, a little bit more this idea of projection, the Chit Shakti, and a little bit more this idea that this creation also has a type of reality and is a manifestation of Brahman. The Mahavakyas are all deal with the nature of the self and Brahman. None of them deal with the nature of the universe. Shankaracharya probably is the one who chose these four, which we call Mahavakyas. It's not that the Upanishads contained something with a red letter that we read it and say, oh, here's one of the Mahavakyas. Somebody had to choose it. There is nothing special. They are special, but probably Shankaracharya chose that when he founded his Dashanami Sampradaya, and each of the four Mahavakyas will go with each of the four different pitas, matas in the different parts of India. Anyhow, I'm getting it too complicated here. But my point is that one of the great sayings, which is not one of the four Mahavakyas, is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, that all this entire universe is a Brahman. Not that the entire universe is imaginary or false or a dream, but is a Brahman itself. But again, covered with this false superimposition of name and form, nama rupa. So Thakur finishes this. Let me read the first sentence, then we'll get the second together. The Gyanis. So Gyanis generally, and this is just terminology, by Jnani generally we mean the non-dualist. The followers of Ramanuja, they are also Gyanis, because they reason things out, they use logic. But it's just become standard, Thakur and most, that when we talk about the Gyanis, we mean the non-dualists. The Gyanis who adhere to the non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta say that the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, the universe itself and all its living beings, are the manifestations of Shakti, the divine power. Then, he says, if you reason it out, you will realize that all these are as illusory as a dream. Brahman alone is the reality, and all else is unreal. Now we get the very strict, now he's following this Advaita Vedanta, according to Shankaracharya, very strictly. Even this very Shakti is unsubstantial like a dream. Now, Thakur is going to explain his position, which is that these are positions. His position is that these are positions. His position is not that either you choose that I believe this is true or this is true. Each one is a path. Joto matoto pat. He doesn't simply refer to the different faith traditions of the world. He's referring to the different schools of Vedanta philosophy also. So then he says, but though you reason all your life, unless you are established in samadhi, you cannot go beyond the jurisdiction of Shakti. Now, established in samadhi and in samadhi, I think Thakur uses the term shamadhisto, and generally it means in the state of samadhi. It doesn't mean a person who's established in it and can go back and forth. Thakur was established in it. But even when Thakur was not in that state, when his mind came down, he was within the realm of Maya because he had some sense of I in mind. Even though there was no attachment to it, it was perfectly pure, it was a fully ripe ego. But even then, he would accept this play of Shakti, and he would accept that as true. He would say, I see everything as a manifestation of the Divine Mother. So it's only in that state of samadhi when one transcends everything of the relative universe. So, but though you reason all your life, unless you are established in samadhi, you cannot go beyond the jurisdiction of Shakti. Even when you say, I am meditating or I am contemplating, still you are moving in the realm of Shakti within its power. And That means, within the realm of Shakti, means that we have some sense of I, some ego consciousness is there. Even though, and Thakur also says, you can reason 1,000 times that this I is false, it's unreal, it's insubstantial. Still, the second we stop reasoning, it comes back. So this was a very firm conviction that it's not a question of what's ultimately and absolutely real or false. It's a question of where is our mind at the time? What is our sense of self-identification? It's very, very practical. When Swamiji gave various definitions of religion or spiritual life, one was that it's a question of being and becoming. Now, the being part will be this absolute truth, but the becoming is what we're interested in. We have to start, if we have some sense of I, and some sense of attachment and body consciousness, then we have to think that we have to transform, we have to change, we have to go from point A to point B. We're on a spiritual journey. At the end, we may say that we were perfect from the very beginning. But to simply say that in the beginning and not do any spiritual practice won't get us to that point. So Thakur is very, very practical. He says, even when you say, I am meditating or I am contemplating, still you are moving within the realm of Shakti, within its power. So we have to deal with it. There's no point in our saying that this world is a dream, and then we go about and do everything to satisfy all of our little desires, this and that, and at the same time say everything else is unreal. So there's a type of hypocrisy there. And if not hypocrisy, then at least we're not doing anything that will take us from point A to point B. We're stuck in the being, and we're overlooking the becoming. We want to transform ourselves. So now he'll talk from this slightly lower plane, because we can't talk from the highest plane. The highest plane, no one can say anything. That's immersed in Brahman, and no one can say anything about that. Come down a little bit, and then he says, thus Brahman and Shakti are identical. Now the word that's used is abhinna. This means they're inseparable. Slight distinction. Why make a big point about this? Because this is a little bit similar to the Sankhya philosophy, where we have this Brahman, which is called Purusha, and then we have the Shakti, which is called Prakriti, and they are separate. The Prakriti or nature is dependent upon the Purusha, but they're two separate categories. In Vedanta, and according to Sri Ramakrishna, and according to Shakti philosophy, we can't separate them. So here I would say inseparable is a little bit closer to the meaning. Thus Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. If you accept one, you must accept the other. So they're not identical in the sense that there's no distinction, because he'll be talking about it like fire and its power to burn. We can make a distinction. We know fire, what that means, and we know what a burning power means. So they're two separate things, but they can't be found separately. One inheres in the other. Substance and attribute. He says, if you see the fire, you must recognize its power to burn also. You cannot think of fire without its power to burn, nor can you think of the power to burn without fire. You cannot conceive of the sun's rays without the sun, nor can you conceive of the sun without its rays. This is a very simple thing for us to understand. We have the two categories of substance and attribute. So the substance will be the thing itself. Take a chair. We can't conceive of a chair that's not a particular color and a particular shape. It has to have them in order to be a chair. So it'll have to have a certain color. We can't conceive of a color that's not the color of something. Even if it's just the sky, a color can't exist unless it's the attribute of something, and a thing can't exist unless it has attributes. So this is how Thakur conceives of this relationship between Brahman and Shakti. Now sometimes when he talks about Shakti, we'll see he means Brahman itself. He means Brahman itself. He's not talking about the power that inheres in Brahman. He's talking about the package. Brahman and his power together, he'll call Shakti. So we'll see that he'll use it in two different senses. So when he says Brahman and Shakti are identical, he means that consciousness and its power. What is the power of consciousness? It's called Chit Shakti. There may be different aspects of it, but basically it's through the power of consciousness itself. So almost as if we have to bring in this idea of the cosmic mind somehow, that Brahman will think this world, project this world, just as the dream world is projected out of the dreamer, that there's a power that can project, that can take consciousness from an undifferentiated state to a differentiated state, to create something that will be real insofar as it's experienced as real. If we want to analyze it back into Brahman itself, into consciousness, we can do that. But from our point of view, some separation has taken place between subject and object. Some separation has taken place between this drishya, and that means that is to be seen, and drashta. So the seer and the seen, subject and object. What is milk like? Oh, you say it is something white. You cannot think of the milk without the whiteness, and again, you cannot think of the whiteness without the milk. Thus, one cannot think of Brahman without Shakti, or of Shakti without Brahman. Now, what do the Advaitins do with this Maya? Ultimately, they explain it in terms of Shakti. They're helpless. If Brahman doesn't have some power, then what is it? Thakur says, if a king doesn't own a kingdom, if a king doesn't have the power to throw people in jail and do all of this, then he's not a king. This is Brahman has, otherwise it can't become a creator. So the Brahman, and because the Ishvara we think of as the creator, but Ishvara is nothing but Brahman. They're not separate things, or Divine Mother, or Saguna Brahman. They're not separate things. The power is not always manifest. That's the only distinction. Thakur will explain these things. So one cannot think of the absolute without the relative, or of the relative without the absolute. Now, there are so many different ways of understanding why and how this universe comes into being. And they're all for our sake. None of them are scientific, fully logical and rational explanations, because there's no fully logical, rational explanation. Why this universe is the way it is, why it is at all. Why there was a interesting German philosopher named Heidegger. He said the number one question of philosophy is, why is there anything at all? Why is there not nothing? Why did Brahman stop simply being Brahman and manifest as this universe? Was Brahman bored? Did Brahman want to experience? All different ideas. Was it just a game? Was it just play? For our sake, because there's no real answer. So Thakur has his favorite explanations, which again, I don't look at them as explanations, I look at them as spiritual attitudes, which can be very helpful. We don't have to think that something is scientifically true for it to be a helpful attitude for us to take. So now he'll say the primordial power. So this is that Adi Shakti or Mahamaya. I don't know what the actual term he's using is, but here, the primordial power is ever at play. She is creating, so this is the Divine Mother, creating, preserving, and destroying in play, as it were. So this as it were is important. That he's not saying that I'm giving you the final absolute. It seems like that she's doing it as just as lila, as a type of play. This power is called Kali. Kali is verily Brahman, and Brahman is verily Kali. So not the consort of Shiva, not Shiva and Kali or any of the other names for the Divine Mother, not Shiva and Shakti as two halves of the same coin, but maybe two, but one reality, one and the same. So yes, we give a different name to it, that's all. because in one we're observing this power at play, and the other we're observing this power at rest. So Kali is verily Brahman, and Brahman is verily Kali. It is one and the same reality. So here, abhinna really means identical. Here it's not that the two of them are combined, but we're only talking about one thing, one entity. When we think of it as inactive, so now it's us, it's my particular attitude. When I think of it as inactive, that is to say, not engaged in the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction, then we call it Brahman. But when it engages in these activities, then we call it Kali or Shakti. The reality is one and the same. The difference is in name and form. Now, one thing to note here is that we call it Brahman when it's not engaged in the acts of creation, preservation, and destruction. Is it not Brahman during that period also? Yes. But we don't limit it to that. So that means that it's whenever it's nirguna, it's also saguna, because these gunas have to inhere in something which without those gunas would be saguna. The example that I like, which Swami Swananji used to give very, very often, is that when the woman gives birth to the child, then she's a mother, but she's still a woman. That woman part is always there. That's the Brahman part. The mother part is this Shakti, is the Kali part, that can only exist if the other part is there. So Brahman doesn't lose its Brahmanhood. When this Nirguna Brahman doesn't cease to be Nirguna Brahman, when this Chit Shakti is active, when it's projecting the universe and holding up the universe, that's always there. That remains there, unchanged. So the sun is the sun. There's no question. Sun doesn't change. It's simply the sun. But when there's something for it to reflect in, so that there are a multitude of living beings, then it's not simply that in Nirguna Brahman sun, then it's also Saguna, and that power is there. It is like water called in different languages by different names. Now remember, this is the example that Thakur usually uses and we normally associate with the harmony of religions. Then all the religions will take it to the same goal. They call God by different names. Here he's using it in terms of this relationship between Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman, and to show that the Saguna, that the Brahman as the source of creation, that is up to us how we want to understand it. We can call it the Divine Mother. We can call it Shakti. We can use any Ishvara, Saguna Brahman. It can be any of the names that the other religions use for it, for the Creator God. That, when we talk about the personality and all of that, that's partly our understanding that we're projecting on top of it. There's nothing absolute about that. There's nothing absolute about the name that we choose. But each one is fine, each one is good, each one is helpful, and we use the one and the concept that we like best. The absolute reality is Brahman itself, which we can't say anything about. So it is like water, called in different languages by different names, such as Jal, Pani, and so forth. There are 3 or 4 ghats on a lake. The Hindus who drink water at one place call it Jal. The Muslims at another place call it Pani. And the English at a third place call it water. All 3 denote one and the same thing, the difference being in the name only. In the same way, some address the reality as Allah, some as God, some as Brahman, some as Kali, and others by such names as Rama, Jesus, Durga, Hari. Now, Sri Ramakrishna mentions this illustration many, many times, and in other places we'll find that he adds something else, and that is that they all draw water from the pond in their own type of container. So the Hindus will have a type of pitcher, the Muslims will have a type of pouch, the leather sack or something, they fill water. Christians may take a bucket, but they're all accessing it, and they can drink it and use it for washing and do all sorts of things with it, but it also takes its own shape, not just its own name. They'll use different names, but it takes a different shape. So when we want to access that, and what is the water in the pond? That's a Brahman. That doesn't require any name or anything. It simply is what it is. But if we want to access it, then we use the container of the mind, or the container of the heart. And it takes a shape and a form and a name, and this is what we worship as the personal God. And it's not absolute, but it's real, because the water is real. And the name and the form are secondary, but important, because they give it a personal touch for us. So this analogy of drawing water from the pond works equally well with all of the different religions and the different schools of Vedanta. Keshab, with a smile. Describe to us, sir, in how many ways Kali, the Divine Mother, sports in the world. Now this will be a little bit of just what we read in the different scriptures and Puranas and other types of scriptures which deal with the Divine Mother. Master, with a smile. Oh, she plays in different ways. It is she alone who is known as Mahakali, Nitya Kali, Shmashana Kali, the mother who lives in the cremation ground, Raksha Kali, and Shyama Kali, Mahakali, and Nitya Kali are mentioned in the Tantra philosophy. They'll have their own texts. When there were neither the creation, nor the sun, the moon, the planets, and the earth, and when darkness was enveloped in darkness, then the mother, the formless one, Mahakali, the great power, was one with Mahakala, the absolute. So this will be our Brahman, whose power is just in an unmanifest form at that time. Shyama Kali has a somewhat tender aspect and is worshipped in the Hindu households. She is the dispenser of boons and the dispeller of fear. People worship Raksha Kali, the protectress in times of epidemic, famine, earthquake, drought, and flood. Shmashana Kali is the embodiment of the power of destruction. She resides in the cremation ground, surrounded by corpses, jackals, and terrible female spirits. So now we're clearly in the realm of allegory and Puranic types of thinking. But for those who are devoted to the worship of the Divine Mother, this gives the mind something to hold on to, and everything has its symbolic importance. Mythology is not something to be looked down upon. There's a tremendous value to mythology. It expresses through stories concepts and ideas, and stories and symbols that we can understand better than we can logically, through the logical mind. So it has a tremendous role to play. When some people say, oh, this is mythological, we shouldn't think that means that it has no value. It has tremendous value. I spoke once in Providence, and I was talking about the Vedic mythology, because there's also, in the Vedas, and Upanishads, we also have these different ideas of Brahma and Hiranyagarbha and Prajapati and sons and everything. So somebody got offended and said, why do you call it mythology? Will you call these Christian stories mythology and others mythology? I said, yeah, of course, they're all mythology, but it doesn't, he took it as a very negative thing. I tried to explain, no, it's a very positive thing. This is, Joseph Campbell. He really popularized this idea of the importance of mythology. There were others also. What is her name? I forget, one woman writer who did a lot of work on mythology. Joseph Campbell, by the way, was very helpful in the English translation of this Gospel of Ramakrishna that we're reading. He was very closely connected with Swami Nikhilananda at the time. Whether a disciple or not, I'm not quite sure, but anyhow, very devoted to him. So this is Shoshan Kali, Smashana Kali, resides in the cremation ground surrounded by corpses, jackals, and terrible female spirits. From her mouth flows a stream of blood. From her neck hangs a garland of human heads, and around her waist is a girdle made of human hands. It's a little bit similar to our Bhavatarani that Thakur used to worship, but that's half and half. That also has the very loving aspect of giving boons and freedom from fear without all the blood coming out of the mouth. After the destruction of the universe, at the end of a great cycle, the Divine Mother garners the seeds for the next creation. She is like the elderly mistress of the house who has a hodgepodge pot in which she keeps different articles for household use. All F. Oh yes, housewives have pots like that where they keep sea foam. This is, Master refers to, perhaps to the cuttlefish bone found on the seashore. The popular belief is that it is hardened sea foam. Blue pills, small bundles of seeds of cucumber, pumpkin, and gourd, and so on. They take them out when they want them. In the same way, after the destruction of the universe, my Divine Mother, the embodiment of Brahman, gathers together the seeds for the next creation. After the creation, the primal power dwells in the universe itself. She brings forth this phenomenal world and then pervades it. In the Vedas, now when Thakur says in the Vedas, very often he means Upanishads, because they belong to the Vedas. In the Vedas, creation is likened to the spider and its web. The spider brings the web out of itself and then remains in it. God is the container of the universe and also what is contained in it. Adhara, Adheya. He's both of these. Now, what does this mean? That if we think that at the end of creation we'll all get liberation, that we'll go back to Brahman and this universe will go back to its unmanifest form, we don't get off the hook that easily. Everything, whatever the state of affairs is, that will go into some suspended animation, and when the next creation comes, we also continue with our own karma and all of that. That all gets stored somehow. Now, we have this concept of the microcosm and macrocosm. So what takes place in this divine play, and this divine play between Brahman going to sleep for a while and then waking up again, takes place within us also. This is why we have something called the Karana Sharira. Karana Sharira is a causal body, because when we go to sleep at night, everything that was in the mind, everything that manifested in the mind as an opinion or a feeling or a tendency, all of these things, they go into this hodgepodge pot. So that when we wake up, everything comes back out again the same way that it was before, and we're the same person that we were before. So this is what happens at the end of this cycle, that everything that we see now, it goes into some potential form. This is what Swamiji likes to call involution, evolution and involution. If this everything evolves out and grows into this big tree, then when that tree drops a little seed, the whole tree is involved in that little seed. That means the potential for the tree is in that one little seed. So the same thing with this universe. At the end, everything gets involved. Thakur used to talk sometimes about this anuloma viloma, in that sense, involved, so that when creation comes again, everything will emerge just as it was before. That means, us, particularly for us as individuals, then we continue just as we did before, only there's a little break, which we're not even aware of. Everything is just suspended animation. This is all theory, of course. We don't know how things really work. Is Kali, my Divine Mother, of a black complexion? Now, I mentioned before that Thakur had a little way of introducing songs. He'll introduce a concept, and he'll quote a line from the song. He'll explain what it means, then he'll sing the song. It's a very beautiful kind of teaching technique. Not that he thought it out ahead of time, but it was very common the way he did it. Is Kali, my Divine Mother, of a black complexion? She appears black because she is viewed from a distance, but when intimately known, she is no longer so. The sky appears blue at a distance, but look at it close by and you will find that it has no color. The water of the ocean looks blue at a distance, but when you go near and take it in your hand, you find that it is colorless. The Master became intoxicated with divine love and sang, "Is Kali, my mother, really black? The naked one of blackest hue lights the lotus of the heart." This was the song that Swamiji was heard to sing when he left the shrine on the very final day of his life. He got up quite early and went into the shrine room and locked the door. So nobody else went in. He stayed in for several hours, and when he came out, they heard him singing the song. So probably his final meditation was on this idea of this mysterious play of the Divine Mother. One of the great themes of Mother worship is that the greatest devotees of the Divine Mother, here this is a Kamalakanta song, Ramprasad, they all have complete agreement that impossible to know who this Divine Mother really is. And it's very nice. Some people may say, what's the point of all of this if we don't have answers for anything? They say, no, the very nature of the Divine Mother, that at the very heart of this universe is something very mysterious. And this is the essence of the worship of God as Mother, that we want to know Mother. We want to lie in the lap of Mother. We don't want to understand all of the things that are impossible for us to understand. So it's interesting to me that was the song that Swamiji sang the very last day of his life. Now, this idea of, at a distance, what Thakur is saying is that we see God as having a certain form. Why? Because there's distance, not real distance. There's separation because of the sense of I. He explained it this way, and not that we're so far away. We may be very close. Thakur had visions of the Divine Mother dwelling within him as close as possible, but at a distance means that there was some I consciousness separating them. Not at a great distance, but we're using that analogy here. At a great distance, we may see something with shape and form and color and everything. We get closer and closer using the idea of either the sky or water, and we see that the water, which it looks very green or very blue, it can have different colors. We take it in our hands, we see that it's colorless. If you ever go to Prayag, Allahabad, and you see the Ganges coming from one side and the Yamuna coming from the other side, you see a slight difference in color. One will be a little bit greenish, a little bit bluish. Or you go to let's see, you reach a certain age and names don't come, to Kanyakumari, huh? And you have the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. You also see a slightly different hue of the colors of the water, but you take in your hand and they're equally clear. The Master continued, bondage and liberation are both of her making. By her Maya, worldly people become entangled. Okay, now I make it a point never to say woman in gold, huh? Because it doesn't sound nice. And when Thakur spoke to women, he would use the term Purusha, men in gold. But I'm going to do it this time because I'm going to read something. I'll get to it in a second. By her Maya, worldly people become entangled in woman in gold. That means in the worldly life. And again, through her grace, they attain their liberation. She is called the Savior and the remover of the bondage that binds one to the world. Okay, now, I got this idea because last night we read a very nice passage from Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, Lila Prasanga. And this is just so we really understand how Thakur looked upon women. Sometimes people will think that, we pick out one or two little things that he said nice, that women are all manifestation of the Divine Mother, but how did he really show it in his life? And the Swami Sharadananda wrote one little section here that I want to read about this beautifully sweet relationship that Sri Ramakrishna had with the women devotees. Huh? We read it last night. Okay. If I can find it. Was it the night before? Oh, Kumar. Where is it? Okay. We are unable to express what a sweet relation the Master, devoid of the slightest tinge of desire, had with these chaste and virtuous women devotees. Many of them knew the Master even then as their chosen ideal. Everyone had that faith in him. Again, some fortunate ones among them knew this directly, like Gopala's mother, through visions, etc. So they knew the Master as more than their own, and did not feel any fear or hesitation in his presence. When they had prepared any nice food at home, in the first instance, they set apart a portion of it for the Master before using it for their household, and either sent it or themselves took it to him at Dakshineshwar. It cannot be calculated how many times these ladies walked to Dakshineshwar and back home. Many of them would never leave the home alone. There's a lot of them were very high-class Brahmin ladies, and it was unthinkable for them to go out on their own. They would forget everything because of him. And then the other members understood it. So it cannot be calculated how many times these ladies walked to Dakshineshwar and back home during the Master's lifetime. On some occasions, they returned home after sunset, on others at 10 p.m., on still others later than midnight after the kirtan and festival, etc., were over at Dakshineshwar. The Master, like a boy, eagerly consulted some of them regarding the medicine for his stomach trouble. If anyone smiled to see him do so, he said, "What do you know? She is the wife of a great doctor. She cannot but know a few medicines." About someone among them, when he saw her intense love towards him, he said, "She is a gopi perfected by God's grace." Of some other, when he tasted the food cooked by her, he said, "She is a cook of Vaikuntha. She has a perfect hand in cooking shukto," and so on. Then it goes on to say how many times he would always go and visit all of the women devotees. He would go to the inner apartment, have food with them, and people would hear laughter and all sorts of things. So this is our Thakur. He had equal love for the women devotees. When he speaks a little strongly, it's to develop a little bit of dispassion and renunciation to especially the young boys who he wanted to become monks. Okay. Then the Master sang the following song in his melodious voice. Okay. This is reference to kite-flying competitions. Yeah, in India, not just India, I probably came from the Middle East, or at least in Afghanistan. There was a very nice book that was written about the kite flyer, that they would have these contests where they would try to cut the string. All of the kites will be flying, and they'll even put some paste with little sharp edges somehow on the string, so that they can do it. They can get next to another one and go back and forth and cut it, and so the string will break and that kite will fly off. Now in the contest, the one that flies off is the loser, and the one who can cut all of the others and still have his kite and bring it back down is the winner. But in the song, it's the opposite. Those are the ones who get liberated. So it's a very beautiful song. In the world's busy marketplace, O Shyama, Divine Mother, thou art flying kites. High up they soar on the wind of hope. held fast by Maya's string. So they're being bound to the world by the string of the kite. Their frames are human skeletons, their sails of the three gunas made. But all their curious workmanship is merely for ornament. Upon the kite strings thou hast rubbed the manja paste of worldliness. So it says glue and barley and powdered glass. So this is what will cut the other strings. So as to make each straining strand all the more sharp and strong. Out of 100,000 kites, at best but one or two break free, and thou dost laugh and clap thy hands, O mother, watching them. So she really wants to lose. Winning, from our point of view, means that we remain in the world. We remain with our enjoyments and everything. For the Divine Mother, it's the opposite. She's really happy when somebody gets free. On favoring wind, says Ramprasad, the kite set loose will speedily be borne away to the infinite across the sea of the world. The Master said, the Divine Mother is always playful and sportive. This universe is her play. So as I say, this is the attitude, spiritual attitude of worshippers of the Divine Mother. She is self-willed and must always have her own way. She is full of bliss. She gives freedom to 1 out of 100,000. Now, it's not fair, huh? Why just that one? Why not us? Huh? So a Brahmo devotee. But sir, if she likes, she can give freedom to all. Why then has she kept us bound to the world? Now, we can give 100,000 different answers. Oh, we have our karma, we have our attachments, all of this. We can't blame the Divine Mother. But Thakur will say that is her will. So Ichamaya, and so she's the embodiment. Ichamai. She's the embodiment of willfulness. This is the attitude that he took. That is her will. She wants to continue playing with her created beings in a game of hide and seek. This is not our hide and seek here. This is a game where someone will take the part of the granny, and all of the little children will be blindfolded, and they'll be groping around, and whoever touches the granny can take off the blindfold. So if everybody does it right away, then the game's over. So she'll try to move away a little bit and make it a little difficult for people to touch her. In the game of hide and seek, the running about soon stops if in the beginning all the players touch the granny. So if everybody gets the liberation, then the game stops. The world comes to an end. We need people to keep this play going on. If all touch her, then how can the game go on? That displeases her. Her pleasure is in continuing the game. Therefore the poet said, this is Ramprasad, out of 100,000 kites, at best but one or two break free. And thou dost laugh and clap thy hands, O mother, watching them. Then Thakur continues, it is as if the Divine Mother said to the human mind in confidence, with a sign from her eye, go and enjoy the world. Huh? Yeah, Thakur likes this idea that mother is very pleased when her child is outside playing with the toy. Huh? Very pleased. She'll do her cooking and everything, that's fine. Let my child enjoy the world. But as soon as the child gets tired of it and longs for the mother and cries, the mother immediately drops everything and comes out, takes the child on her lap. She's happy either way. If my child is enjoying things, okay. If the child realizes the world is not so much fun and wants only me, I'm right there. I'll come immediately. So it is as if the Divine Mother said to the human mind in confidence with a sign from her eye, go and enjoy the world. How can one blame the mind? The mind can disentangle itself from worldliness if, through her grace, she makes it turn toward herself. We're slaves to our own minds, and we're born with that mind. What we're trying to do is rid it of all the tamas and rajas and all these bad samskaras. We can do a certain amount, but we're doing it with the help of the mind itself. So we don't have that absolute freedom, we're using an imperfect instrument to try to perfect that instrument. So this is why some grace is needed, however we understand grace. Only then does it become devoted to the lotus feet of the Divine Mother. Whereupon Sri Ramakrishna, taking upon himself, as it were, the agonies of all householders, sang a song complaining to the Divine Mother. This is called his abhiman. This attitude is very typical of worshippers of the Divine Mother, where they'll be in a state of pique. That what kind of mother are you? Look at our helpless condition, and what are you doing? You're not doing anything. It's a very nice type of attitude. It indicates intimacy. It indicates that closeness that the devotee has, the same closeness that this small child has with its own mother. Mother, this is the grief that sorely grieves my heart, that even with thee for mother, and though I am wide awake, there should be a robbery in my house. That means that how is it possible that divine treasure of your very presence is there, and yet as if I can't find it, as if it's been stolen, that I'm looking, I don't find it. So why did you do that? So blaming the mother. This is the grief that sorely grieves my heart, that even with thee for mother, and though I am wide awake, there should be a robbery in my house. Many and many a time I vow to call on thee, yet when the time for prayer comes round, I have forgotten. Now I see it is all thy trick. Why? Because the mind itself is Maya, is a manifestation of the Divine Mother. As thou hast never given, so thou receivest not. So you won't do anything for me, I won't do anything for you? This is the way the child will talk. Am I to blame for this, O mother? Hadst thou but given, surely then thou hadst received. Out of thine own gifts I should have given to thee. Glory and shame, bitter and sweet, are thine alone. This world is nothing but thy play. Then why, O blissful one, dost thou cause a rift in it? Says Ramprasad. How many songs of Ramprasad Thakur knew? Thakur really looked upon Ramprasad as his ideal. That the mother, he used to say, you revealed yourself to Ramprasad. Why won't you reveal yourself to me? Before his vision in the Kali temple. Says Ramprasad, thou hast bestowed on me this mind, and with a knowing wink of thine eye, bidden it at the same time to go and enjoy the world. Yes, my child, go enjoy it. Stick your hand in the fire. Enjoy it. Stick your hand in the fire. It'll have to happen once or twice before you start to understand. And so I wander here forlorn through thy creation, blasted as it were by someone's evil glance, taking the bitter for the sweet, taking the unreal for the real. The Master continued, men are deluded through her Maya and have become attached to the world. Says Ramprasad, thou hast bestowed on me this mind, and with a knowing wink of thine eye, bidden it at the same time to go and enjoy the world. Let me stop here. We're going to get to a very big question. Is it possible to realize God without complete renunciation? So we will save that for next time. And I will close with our chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukham Bhattvadavikraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. I thank all of you for joining us for the class. Hope everyone is well. Have a good week, and we will see you next time. Thank you.